All right. Good evening, everybody. How are you? I
Good
am
evening.
I am Brenda Green with the Be Strong Group, and I'm so excited to once again have you guys join us for our another talk about a topic that's important to the Be Strong Group and those with sickle cell disease. And I just want to introduce myself again for those of you who are joining us for the first time. I'm Brenda Green with the Be Strong Group. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which my husband and I founded in 2017 in honor of our son, Braden, who has sickle cell disease, and he was diagnosed at birth. So we took on uh, what we feel is our purpose to do our part to spread awareness about sickle cell disease. And September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. So we decided to have every week, we decided to have a series of discussions about topics that are important to those with sickle cell disease, as well as parents or caregivers of those with sickle cell disease. So we're so excited to have our special guest speaker today. But before I introduce her, I do want you to know that this discussion is for educational and informational purposes only. So if you're looking for specific care for you or your warrior, please refer to your care group or your medical care group and team. Okay. So our speaker today is Miss Alicia Patricia Harris. And Alicia is a native of Paterson, New Jersey, where she graduated from the infamous Eastside High School under the leadership of Principal Joe Clark. She later went on to obtain her bachelor's in business management while living in Virginia. In 2009, she moved to Columbia and began attending Webster University, where she received a master's degree in professional mental health counseling. Currently, Ms. Harris is a licensed professional counselor, licensed addictions counselor, and the owner therapist at Brella Counseling Services, LLC, where her mission is to assist individuals in the pursuit of positive mental health. She loves working in her community for causes such as domestic violence, homelessness, and family crisis issues. And Miss Harris's favorite quote is, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." That's a perfect quote. And I'm going to turn this over to Alicia. She's going to speak to us today about protecting our mental health. And her discussion will help not only caregivers like myself, um, but also warriors, young to old. So she's going to give us a wealth of information that we can take with us. And while you're watching, if a question comes to your mind, please include it in the comments under this video, and actually go ahead and share. And if you're watching this on replay, go ahead and put your question in and for Alicia, and we'll be sure to get you an answer. So Alicia, we're going to hand it over to you. She's prepared a presentation, so we're eager to hear.
Thank you so much. And Brenda, I want to thank you for this awesome opportunity to come and speak to you and all the sickle cell warriors out there. Thank you so much for all your hard work and efforts that you and your husband do on a daily basis to impact the community in a positive way for those who are dealing with sickle cell or those who are caring for someone who is dealing with sickle cell. So I thank you again for allowing me to be here. So if you don't mind share, I need to share my screen. I wanted to give something that was visual because a lot of times people are visual learners. And so although we're going to have great conversation, sometimes people want to take notes and use that as their takeaway. So I just created a PowerPoint to share with that information. So give me just a second. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
All right. So the title of this talk was the mental health check-in. And so we're going to talk about the importance of caring for yourself mentally. A lot of people, when we talk about health wise, we tend to think about our physical health. Our mental health is usually not in the forefront of our minds. And so we want to bring that to the forefront today, because your mental health is just as important as physical. So I like the definition that the CDC gave, and it talks about mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. And it also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others and make choices. And mental health is important at every stage of our lives, from childhood and adolescent all the way through adulthood. So, why is mental health important? And I love the topics that you presented for tonight, as well as the questions, because a lot of times when we think about our mental health, we think, oh, I just need to get more rest, or oh, I just need to go and exercise, or maybe I need to eat better and I'll be okay. However, we need to understand that mental illness is more common than people think. Around 1 in 6 Americans suffer from mental illness, in a given year, any health condition, whether it's depression or anxiety. It affects our physical health. When we think about our health as a person, we cannot separate our brain from our heart, or our brain from our limbs. We look at the total person. And so if your mental health is not where it needs to be, ultimately your physical health will be affected as well. We look at diseases or injuries that can increase your risk. Chronic diseases, sickle cell, chronic pain. There's many conditions that a person can deal with over time. It can affect your mental health overall. So, why is it important that we talk about mental health awareness? Well, it's important because early detection can make a difference. Getting treatment sooner can prevent symptoms from getting worse, as well as avoid the negative effects that it may have on your life. And also, mental illness runs in families. We have, you've heard sayings where people were older and they say, oh, she's just senile, or he's just crazy. Well, those could be signs of mental illness. However, because there's such a stigma attached to mental illness, individuals will not receive or seek treatment. What are some causes? We talk about chronic illness and how that directly correlates with mental health. Chronic illness, we know if a person is dealing with a chronic illness, there's going to be complex causes, right? We have comorbidities that people deal with. There's risk factors when you deal with chronic illness. It can be a long illness, sometimes without a cure. And then it impairs our ability to function. So whether that is being disabled or just limited mobility, there is some form of impairment. It can cause high blood sugar levels, and it can also disrupt our blood circulation. All of that can be a recipe for what's on the right-hand side of the screen, and that is emotional stress, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, and ultimately chronic pain, chronic illness can lead to thoughts of suicidality. Sometimes it is so exacerbated in regards to the living conditions that a person may feel that that is their only option, to no longer be here, so that they don't have to deal with the pain, with the disability, with the quality of life that they have due to their illness. And then some tools that we want to talk about. There's several. I love the fact that we have modern technology. I'm also thankful that we are in an age of technology in the midst of COVID, because it does bring about some coping mechanisms that can assist for those who are, isolated. So we talk about using technology such as apps. There are several apps. If you have a smartphone or an Android, there are several apps that you can use that will help with improving your mood. And I listed some of them there. One is Calm, and then you have Breathe, and I did spell that correctly. That's the way the app spells it. So it's not a typo. And then you have Happify. But that's just to name a few. There are several apps out there that allow our movers and shakers, people who are on the go, to still be able to take care of their mental health, but also participating in whatever daily activities they're responsible for. Another thing that I like is positive affirmations. In my line of work, I ascribe to a specific type of therapy, and it's known as cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the characteristics of it is if you want to change your outcomes, you've got to change your thoughts and ultimately your actions. And so if I look at it the same way when it comes to positive affirmations, the things you speak over yourself and the things you speak to yourself have the ability to affect how you show up in the earth. And so positive affirmations just says that, changing the way you speak to yourself, the way you speak about yourself is very important. And there is an app for that that you can download from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. And they will send positive affirmations to you on a daily basis. So if you're sitting there listening to me and you say, well, I'm not familiar with positive affirmations, how does that work? Where do I get them from? Here's an easy way to ease yourself into changing your language so that you're speaking more positive. So the other thing I have here is ask for help. And I know that sounds very simple, but you would not imagine how difficult it is for some people just to say, hey, I need help. And so I say here, it's okay not to be okay. Someone walks up to you or calls you on the phone and say, hey, how are you? And we sometimes, I don't know if it's out of courtesy or it's just the default, we say, well, I'm okay. And sometimes we're really not. And so I want people to know it is okay not to be okay. We as women, people of color, men, we put on this, I have to present a certain way because this is what is expected of me. I'm the caregiver, so I can't fall apart because everybody needs me. If I fall apart, what will they do? Who's going to run the house? Who's going to take the child to the doctor? Who's going to get the oil changed? Who's going to pay the bills? But it's okay not to be okay. And then we need to do yearly or quarterly mental health checkups. We go to the doctor yearly, most of us, to get our physical, whether it's a yearly physical, whether it's a mammogram for our men, whether it's a prostate check, but we rarely go for a yearly or quarterly mental health check. When you're filling out your paperwork at the doctor's office, if you're seeing the doctor for the first time, I don't see many questions on there that talk about mental health. They may say something like, are you feeling depressed? Or have you been anxious? It depends, but we need to be intentional about taking care of our mental health and getting those checkups, because remember what I said before, early detection, just like any health disease, early detection can make a big difference. Oh, I gotta go back. I'm going too fast for myself. Okay, so here, COVID. We want to talk about COVID because I would be remiss if I didn't. With the new normal that we have now, social distancing. And I like the term physical distancing, and somebody may say, oh, that's just a play on words. But when you think about it, we're not socially distant per se. We still have modes and means of communication where we can keep in touch with one another, similar to tonight. We are here doing a Zoom talk where under other circumstances, we may be in person. So we're not necessarily socially distant, but we are physically distant. And so we have to keep in mind what comes out of that. And we talk about isolation. Well, that can exacerbate any underlying mental health issues. When you think about, we've been in COVID now since March, it is now September, and you have had families or single individuals that have been in their homes since March. That's sobering to think about. You have had no interaction with others, or you've had very limited interaction. And some, even in the homes, it's still a form of isolation because we don't know what those family dynamics look like. Is it an extremely stressful environment? The kids are home, they can't go to school. So now you have families, parents that take on the role of teacher as well as parent. They handle the finances, they are the carpool. And so it's just extra layers of things being added. So when we talk about isolation, there's a lot of reasons why people may continue to isolate even to this day. A lot of it is the fear of contracting COVID. We've seen the news, we've seen the statistics, and we've watched the bodies that have been taken out, due to COVID. And so some people have a real fear of not only catching COVID, but then they also think, what if I die due to COVID? And that can bring about depression. That can bring about insomnia. Also, we got to look at the suicide rates. And suicide was already an issue. However, with the way we are interacting or not interacting, so to speak, the increased rates of suicide has gone through the roof. I've heard countless stories of medical professionals taking their lives, either because they have been so traumatized by working on the front lines and taking care of individuals that contracted COVID and ultimately died, or they're looking at policies and procedures that are set up to not benefit some of us. And so as a result, again, these people lose their lives. And so a lot of that stress and trauma has driven some individuals to take their lives. Some of our frontline people have contracted the virus themselves. And so I was reading a story the other day about a young lady who took her life just because she had a fear of catching COVID. She was not diagnosed with COVID. She had a fear of contracting the virus. Then we have increased child abuse and domestic violence. In March, everyone went home. We didn't have those outlets where we can be at work and have that downtime. The children couldn't be at school and have that safety and have those meals that they normally may miss at home. Now everyone is at home. We're all a captive audience in our prospective houses. And so you have relationship issues that spark up. You have abuse issues that spark up. And so now we see a spike in the numbers in regards to child abuse and domestic violence. And then we also have to talk about economic difficulties. I am fortunate enough that I have the ability to work from home and still earn a living and take care of my responsibilities. But we've had a lot of people that were sent home and they had no pay or very limited pay. And so those economic difficulties spill over into other areas. There's a lack of food. There is a lack of resources. So again, we go right back up to the previous bullet point. There's an increase in child abuse and an increase in domestic violence. It's cyclical. And then we talk about, because we had the question, what's the difference between being sad and being depressed? And so I just made note of a few characteristics of each. And this is not by any means an exhaustive list, but to give you kind of an idea when you talk about being sad versus depressed, sadness is temporary. You may have a significant loss in your life. For instance, you may get told that you're furloughed and you have to go home, and now you're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. That could bring about some sadness. You may have gotten, a non-favorable diagnosis or something that you thought was resolved. Now you find out that there is more to be done to address the issue. Things of that nature can bring about sadness. It can be disrupted sleep and eating. That's how it can manifest itself. However, with depression is a little more long term. So if you think about sadness, which is temporary, but you think about someone that has been sad for more than 2 weeks about the same thing, then you start looking at some of the characteristics that make up depression. Depression can manifest itself in physical symptoms, either headaches or upset stomachs, constipation, diarrhea, things of that nature, suicidal thoughts, just feeling worthless or hopeless. And again, it can affect your sleep. Either you are sleeping too much or you're not getting much sleep at all. Either you are overeating or you are barely eating at all. So that's kind of a little a way to gauge sadness versus depression. And like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to paint a picture for you so you can kind of get an idea. And then we talk about individuals that I said earlier that don't seek assistance for mental health. And a lot of the reason is because of stigma. And one of the questions was, what do we do about that? How can we address that? And my response to that is, we have to stop blaming people. We have to stop shaming people. Oh, she just crazy. That's all that's wrong with her. Oh, he's just got a bad temper. That's all that's wrong with him. He'll be okay. Or we have a lack of knowledge. So things that people don't understand or they're not educated in, it's a form of fear that comes up that wants to dismiss what a person is going through. And then media portrayals. When we look at movies and videos and we see someone that's dealing with a mental health issue, they usually portray them as being disheveled, meaning their hair is sticking up on their head, their clothes are tattered and torn, and they're just completely out of their mind. But I want everyone to hear me when I say someone that looks just like me sitting here today could be dealing with depression. Depressed people can be highly functional. They can take care of their daily routine. They can pay their bills. They can do everything that someone who is not struggling with depression does. And they do not have to look like this half-crazed person that you want to take and put in an insane asylum. And then we have to look at race and ethnicity and culture. As African-American people, we don't tend to reach out for assistance when we feel ourselves being depressed, when we feel that we're anxious. Because why? The stigma is there and we try to deal with it in our own way. But I go back to my previous statement that says it's okay not to be okay. And lastly, spiritual victimization. I've heard people tell people, you don't need to go to counseling. You're a Christian. You just need to pray. And while I do ascribe to prayer and I have a spiritual relationship, the answer I give to the person sitting across from me is this: if it were not so that people would need help with their emotional and mental issues, do we think that it would have came up in the mind of man to go to school to become a psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, and so on? So the need has already been met because you have what you need to address your issues, but now you have to take the step and have the courage to stand out, to step up and admit that you need the help. And so, as Christians or whatever faith that you ascribe to, again, it goes back to that shaming. You cannot use a person's religious beliefs or lack thereof to shame them in acknowledging the fact that they are having emotional difficulty. And that is what I had to share for this evening. And I will turn it back over to Brenda so we can go from there.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me, all right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, let's make sure we get back into. I appreciate. I know a couple of things that you pointed out that stuck with me is asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm speaking from the perspective. Well, I think I could speak on behalf of warriors, adult warriors with sickle cell disease who want, who all their lives they fought to take care of themselves and advocate for themselves and to protect themselves, and then on
Right.
the perspective of a parent who want to take care of this child because this child is facing something that they didn't cause themselves and they were born with, and you have the desire just to want them to have as helpful or productive of a life as possible, so that
Right.
as just regular everyday average life, on top of that you have a chronic illness that they have to deal with, and you're trying to fight and battle with it every single day just to help them live. So
Right.
being in a position to ask for help, that's important. That's important because
Mm-hmm.
it's not a sign of weakness. It's
It
not.
is not. It is not. And you, as a caregiver, and all caregivers out there, you've got to be intentional about practicing self care. And so, when we talk about self care, that I don't know what that looks like for each individual. So, there's not a 1, 2, 3 formula to say self care is this. Self care is what meets your needs. And so that is tailor made to address the areas that you're dealing with. But we want to be intentional about caring for ourselves, because if not, we become fatigued, and then guilt sets in because we're tired and we feel as though we have to keep going because they need us, and then resentment can set in, and before you know it, you've gone down this spiral and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah. And another thing, Alicia, I have to acknowledge that I have I'm so blessed with my support team, my support system.
Mm-hmm.
It helps. My dad is a pastor as well. So whenever I need something, he will give me words of encouragement. He would pray. And there's one thing he would tell me that, that scripture that says that God wouldn't put more on you than,
Right, right,
he explained that out, explained that to us. My dad was saying, God has made you strong and chosen you to be the mother of this amazing child who is a warrior.
right,
And
right,
he won't put us in a situation he's not going to keep us from getting into the situation because stuff is going to happen. Okay.
right. He gives us free
But
will, right?
tools that we need
Mm-hmm.
to get through it. And his
That's right.
tools will come as your daddy calling you and praying for you, a text
Mm-hmm.
from a friend say, hey girl, how you doing? A hug
Mm-hmm.
child that you didn't ask for. So
Right.
I honestly believe that, because there's a lot of times when things have gotten overwhelming for me as a mom and worrying, um, I got a message in some kind of way. What it could be
Right.
a phone call or a text. So I honestly believe in there. So that's a good part too, to have a support system. And that's one of the services as a nonprofit that we want to provide when we make, you know, meet other families and other warriors. We want to create a relationship to where
Right.
your number, I'm going to text you, say, hey girl, you okay? Or, hey,
Right.
you're doing well, because we need someone to check on. And we share this, check on your strong friend, that friend who you
Yes.
always think has it together, always looking
Yes.
like, oh, she's in control or he's in control. They need checking on too. So I'm
Right.
shared all of this information. I really appreciate it. And I know we were trying to keep it in 30 minutes, but I want to take a second out to one of our board members is on, Angela Mack, and she's been monitoring social media. And I want to see if there are any questions or comments out there that she's read. Angie?
Okay.
Hey, I have one question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. As a parent, how would I know when my child needs help mentally?
Hmm. That's a very good question. And depending on the age of the child, I mean, even I just stated earlier, the stigma causes people, adults, not to say when they need help. So it may not be as plain as him or her coming out saying, Mommy, I think I'm depressed, or Mommy, I think I'm anxious. I would say have that interaction with your child. Your child, you know when something is off, you know when they're not quite feeling well. And I'll give you an example. My youngest daughter, years ago, she was in middle school. She had her wisdom teeth pulled all at the same time. And she was taking the pain medication and she did well. And one morning I went to fix her breakfast and she was in her room and she was just crying, crying and crying. And I was trying to talk with her to see what was going on. And finally, when I was able to get her to calm down, she just kept rocking back and forth. And she said, Mama, I'm in so much pain. Well, as a mother, one, and then a therapist, another, I know what chronic pain can lead to. And so it's those signs like that that you have to watch for. They may not come out and say, because they may not know how to articulate what they're feeling, but they just know something is just not right. So I encourage you to have conversations with your children, do the check ins, ask them how they're doing, and not allow them to give you the one word, I'm okay, I'm good. You know, ask those open ended questions so they have to have dialogue with you.
That's real good.
Thank you for that. Another question was, how can we get help if we realize our child, him or her, needs some assistance? How can we get help? Who do we call?
That's a great question. You want to, depending on what type of help you're talking about. Now, we do have the National Suicide Hotline if it is to that extreme. If it's something where you think they may benefit from therapy, then if they're adolescent, talk to your pediatrician. And have that conference with your doctor, with the child, and see what next steps are. Depending on where you work with your health insurance, most health insurance companies they offer an employee assistance program. And so if you do have an EAP through your work, that's a very good resource to reach out to let them know what your child is experiencing, and they can help you get connected to a provider.
Thank you very much. That was good information. That's all the questions that we have.
Okay, awesome. You're welcome.
All right, that sounds good. And the same information can be shared with adults too. If you
Yes.
have a problem, you know, you can consult with your physician, or like I mentioned in the beginning, you can talk to a member of your care team. I know, you know, I've spoken to other adult sickle cell warriors, and even the children, it starts with they have a group of doctors, you know,
Mm-hmm.
psychologists, the primary care. you may have a specialist, because with sickle cell, it impacts pretty much every, well, it impacts every organ. So you may have a cardiologist, you're going to have a group of doctor, but you can talk to psychologists and different specialists that will help you on that mental level to treat, like I would say, to treat the whole you, because
Right.
it impacts the entire you, and you need to make sure you're on the same page so you can get the help that you can.
It does.
Right. So, and once again, Angie, did we have any comments on our social media page that anybody wanted to share anything? But again, if you're listening, you know, and you have a question, if you're listening on replay and you have a question for Alicia, just put it in the comments. At the end of this video, I'll add her links to her organization, where you can reach out to her directly and get you know, get your questions answered directly. So once again, Alicia, we want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking your schedule to talk with us, to talk with our followers, to just share important information that's really something valuable for everybody. But on top of that, though, it's just another important piece of our pie when you're dealing with a chronic illness like sickle cell disease. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you again for having me.
No problem. So thanks, everybody. This is it. And you can join us for our next talk, which is the 22nd. And we will actually be talking to Dr. Carla Roberts. She's a pediatric hematologist. She's actually Braden's hematologist as well. We claim her, but as well as all of the kids that treated at Prisma Health Children's Hospital. She's their hematologist as far as sickle cell disease. So we're looking forward to that discussion where she'll talk about what is sickle cell disease. So that's it for tonight. I pray that everyone enjoys their evening, and we'll talk to you next time.